At least now you won't have to apologize for bringing her to investor dinners. Lauren Mercer said it with a laugh, and everyone at the table joined in except Caleb. He did something worse. He smiled into his champagne and let them. For blocks away, Jasmine Ellis stood outside the courthouse holding the final divorce decree in a plain white envelope, unaware that her marriage had just become a punchline over lunch. The February wind cut between the buildings in Center City, Philadelphia, lifting the edge of her coat as she stared at the place where her wedding ring used to sit. The pale mark around her finger looked almost ridiculous now, like her skin had not gotten the message yet. 30 minutes earlier, Caleb had signed the last page without looking at her. He had shaken his attorney's hand, checked a notification on his phone, and said, "I think this is better for both of us." Better. Jasmine had nodded because she did not trust herself to answer. 6 years reduced to one folder, 2 signatures, and a sentence people used when they wanted to leave without sounding cruel. Her phone buzzed. She expected Monica, her attorney. Instead, it was her friend Tasha. A screenshot filled the screen. Lauren had posted it to her private social account, then apparently thought better of it and deleted it. Too late. In the picture, Caleb sat between his parents at a polished walnut table, a bottle of champagne open beside them. Patricia Mercer had one hand lifted in a toast. Douglas looked relaxed in a way Jasmine had not seen during the entire divorce. The caption read, "New Beginnings." Jasmine stared until the words blurred. Another message from Tasha appeared. "I'm sorry. You should not have had to see that." Jasmine swallowed hard. She could almost hear Patricia's voice, polished and sweet enough to hide the blade underneath. She could imagine Lauren joking about how Caleb had finally gotten his life back. And Caleb, sitting there, saying nothing. That was the part that settled deepest. Not that his family disliked her. They had made that clear for years. It was that he had finally stopped pretending their disrespect bothered him. Jasmine locked the phone and slipped it into her coat pocket. She did not cry. She had spent too many months doing that quietly, in bathrooms, parking garages, and once in the frozen food aisle of a grocery store because a song from their wedding came over the speakers. Today, there was nothing left to negotiate. A Blacktown car pulled to the curb, but Jasmine barely noticed until her phone rang again. This time, the name on the screen made her straighten. Monica Hayes. "Hey," Jasmine answered. "The auction is confirmed for Saturday," Monica said. Her tone was calm, professional. "Harrington House is moving forward. The board approved the reserve, and I need your authorization before close of business." Jasmine glanced back toward the courthouse. "Send it." "Jasmine, there's one more thing." Mercer Ridge registered as a bidder this morning. For the first time all day, Jasmine went completely still. Douglas Mercer's company. Caleb's family. "Do they know?" she asked. "No," Monica said. "As far as I can tell, they have no idea who owns the property." Jasmine looked down at the divorce envelope in her hand, then across the street at her reflection in a dark storefront window. The Mercers were drinking champagne because they believed Caleb had finally cut loose the woman who brought nothing to their world. 4 days from now, they were planning to spend millions buying a building from her. And that was when Jasmine realized something they had never bothered to learn. Silence and poverty were not the same thing. 6 years earlier, Jasmine Ellis would have laughed if anyone told her that one day Caleb Mercer would be embarrassed by the very things he first loved about her. They met on a rainy Thursday in Philadelphia inside a century-old row house that was being evaluated for a preservation grant. Jasmine was standing near a cracked fireplace with a clipboard tucked under one arm, arguing with a contractor about original woodwork. Caleb had been there representing a small real estate investment group, wearing a navy suit that looked too expensive for the dust-covered room. "You know they can replace that trim for half the cost," he said. Jasmine glanced at him. "They can also replace the building with a parking lot. That does not mean they should." Caleb smiled. "So you are the difficult one. I prefer expensive conscience." That made him laugh, and for the next 20 minutes, he followed her through the property asking questions he probably did not need answered. Jasmine was 30 then, working for a non-profit preservation foundation and living in a one-bedroom apartment near Fairmount. She drove an older Subaru, bought coffee from the same corner shop every morning, and packed lunch more often than she ate out. None of it was an act. She liked knowing the names of the people in her neighborhood. She liked spending Saturday mornings at flea markets and Sunday evenings reading on her fire escape when the weather was good. Caleb found that refreshing. At the time, he was still trying to prove himself. He worked long hours, worried about money more than he admitted, and carried the kind of ambition that made every dinner feel slightly rushed. Jasmine never held that against him. She helped him practice presentations at her kitchen table. She proofread investor emails after midnight. When he got rejected from a position he wanted, she ordered pizza, handed him a beer, and said, "You are allowed to be disappointed. You are not allowed to decide this means you failed." He remembered that sentence for years. What Caleb did not know was that Jasmine had never needed his money, and she had never needed the life he was chasing. Her mother, Denise Ellis, had died 2 years before Jasmine met him, leaving behind more than memories and a collection of handwritten recipes. Denise had inherited a stake in a family trust built through commercial property, municipal bonds, and private investments. She had raised Jasmine to treat wealth like plumbing, useful, necessary, and never something you invited people over to admire. After Denise died, Jasmine became managing trustee of the Ellis Heritage Trust. Monica Hayes handled the legal work. A separate advisory team managed most of the investments. Jasmine reviewed reports, signed what needed signing, and then went back to her regular life. She told Caleb her family had been comfortable. That was the word she used. Comfortable. He never asked for more. In fact, early in their relationship, he seemed proud that she did not care about status. One night after dinner, he watched her fold a paper napkin around leftover fries and said, "You are the first woman I have dated who does not seem impressed by any of this." Jasmine looked around the small neighborhood restaurant. Any of what? Money, titles, people pretending they are important. She smiled. Good. Then stop pretending. He reached across the table and took her hand. "That is why I like you." Jasmine believed him. She believed him when he proposed a year later. She believed him when they exchanged vows in a small garden outside the city. She believed the man beside her wanted the life they had built, not some shinier version waiting around the corner. And for a while, he did. That was what made everything that came later harder to understand. Caleb had not always been cruel. He had simply started changing so slowly that Jasmine kept mistaking each new version of him for a bad week. The first time Caleb asked Jasmine to change before one of his company dinners, he made it sound like a favor. He stood in their bedroom doorway, already dressed in a charcoal suit, while Jasmine fastened a simple gold earring in front of the mirror. "Do you have something a little more polished?" he asked. Jasmine looked at her navy dress. "Polished how?" Caleb hesitated. "I do not know. More corporate, maybe. Some of the partners are bringing their wives tonight." The word wives landed strangely, as if Jasmine had become a category instead of the woman he married. Still, she changed. Not because she agreed with him, but because marriage sometimes meant letting small things go. At dinner, Caleb introduced her to a senior partner as someone who works with old buildings. Jasmine almost corrected him. She had spent months leading preservation financing for a multi-million-dollar redevelopment project, but the conversation had already moved on. On the ride home, she stared through the passenger window at the lights along Market Street. "You could have just said what I'd do," she told him. Caleb kept his eyes on the road. "I was trying to keep it simple. For him or for you." He exhaled. "Jasmine, not everything has to become a thing." That sentence started appearing more often. When Patricia Mercer recommended a stylist before a charity dinner, Jasmine was told not to make it a thing. When Lauren joked that Jasmine's Subaru looked like something a graduate student would drive, Caleb said his sister was kidding. When Douglas asked whether Jasmine planned to find something more serious than nonprofit work, Caleb changed the subject instead of defending her. None of those moments was big enough to end a marriage. Together, they changed the temperature of it. Caleb's career at Redwood Crest Capital kept climbing. His name appeared on larger deals. His days became meetings, airport lounges, private dinners, and conversations about who had bought what house in which neighborhood. At first, Jasmine was proud of him. She remembered the man who used to practice presentations at her kitchen table with his tie loosened and panic hidden behind jokes. But success had not made him calmer. It made him more aware of every room he entered and whether the people inside thought he belonged there. Eventually, that anxiety reached home. One Friday, Patricia hosted dinner at the Mercer house in Bryn Mawr. Halfway through dessert, she glanced at Jasmine and said, "Caleb has done incredibly well. He always had such potential." Then she smiled toward her son. "Some people grow into the life they were meant for." Lauren lowered her eyes to hide a grin. Jasmine waited. Caleb heard it. She knew he did because his hand stopped moving beside his coffee cup. For 1 second, she thought he would say something. Instead, he took another sip. On the drive home, Jasmine finally asked, "Did that bother you at all?" "What?" "What your mother said." Caleb rubbed his forehead. "She was complimenting me. She was insulting me while she did it." "You are reading too much into everything lately." Jasmine turned toward him. "Am I?" He did not answer. A week later, she found a charity invitation on the kitchen counter with Caleb's name printed beside another blank line. "You did not put my name down," she said. Caleb barely looked up from his laptop. "I have not decided if I am going." But he had. The dinner was already on his calendar. Jasmine understood then that the marriage was not collapsing because of one secret or one terrible night. Something quieter was happening. Caleb was slowly editing her out of the version of his life he wanted other people to see. And once she noticed it, she could not stop seeing all the places where she had already begun to disappear. Caleb asked for the divorce on a Tuesday night, while Jasmine was rinsing 2 coffee mugs in the kitchen. There was no shouting, no slammed door, no dramatic confession. He sat at the island with both hands folded in front of him and said, "I do not think this is working anymore." Jasmine turned off the faucet and looked at him. For a second, the ordinary sound of water draining from the sink felt louder than his voice. "What does that mean?" she asked. Caleb looked down at the counter. "It means I think we have grown apart." She waited for more. He gave her phrases instead. Different priorities. Different lifestyles. Too much tension. A relationship that had become difficult for both of them. Everything sounded practiced. Jasmine dried her hands slowly with a dish towel. "How long have you been thinking about this?" Caleb hesitated. That hesitation told her more than the answer. "A while." "How long?" He finally looked at her. "A few months." Jasmine felt something settle inside her. Not heartbreak exactly. Recognition. "Does your mother know?" Caleb leaned back. "Why does that matter?" "Because I asked you a question." His jaw tightened. "Yes." Jasmine nodded once. "How long has she known?" Silence. Then Caleb said, "About 3 months." That was the moment the marriage ended for Jasmine. Not when he said divorce. Not when he admitted he had stopped trying. It ended when she realized Patricia Mercer had been sitting across from her at family dinners, passing the potatoes, discussing holiday plans, knowing her son had already decided Jasmine would not be part of them. Caleb reached toward a folder on the counter. "I spoke to someone, just to understand the process." Jasmine stared at the folder. "Someone your mother recommended?" He did not answer. He did not need to. 2 weeks later, they sat in mediation in a quiet office near Logan Square. Caleb's attorney presented numbers. The townhouse would be appraised. Joint accounts would be divided. Retirement contributions made during the marriage would be handled according to the agreement. Jasmine did not fight over the furniture, the wine glasses, or the expensive dining table Patricia had insisted they buy. She took what was hers and left what was not. Her separate trust assets never entered the discussion because they had existed before the marriage, remained independently managed, and had never been mixed into their household finances. Caleb seemed to read her lack of resistance as weakness. Patricia definitely did. When Jasmine stepped into the hallway during a break, Patricia was standing near the elevators in a cream coat, speaking quietly with Caleb. She saw Jasmine and gave her a thin smile. "At least you are being realistic about what you contributed." The words were soft enough to sound civilized. Jasmine stopped walking. Caleb looked uncomfortable, but once again, he said nothing. Monica Hayes, standing beside Jasmine with a legal pad tucked under her arm, glanced at her. "Do you want me to respond to that?" Jasmine looked at Patricia, then at Caleb. Years earlier, she would have defended herself. She would have explained her work, her sacrifices, the bills she covered, the nights she stayed up helping Caleb prepare for meetings, the connections she had quietly declined to use because she wanted him to build something himself. Now, none of it felt worth saying. "No," Jasmine replied. "I am done explaining myself to people committed to misunderstanding me." Patricia's smile faded just slightly. Caleb watched Jasmine walk back into the conference room without another word. 3 days later, the divorce was final. And 4 days after that, Mercer Ridge Properties registered for the Harrington House auction. Douglas Mercer believed the building could become the centerpiece of the family's next expansion. Caleb believed helping secure it might repair the tension between him and his father. Patricia believed Jasmine had disappeared from their world for good. None of them knew that the auction catalog sitting on Douglas's desk contained the name of an ownership entity he had never bothered to trace. And none of them knew Jasmine would be in the room when the bidding began. By the time Jasmine arrived at Harrington House on Saturday afternoon, the Mercer family had already claimed a table near the front. The building looked even better dressed for an auction than it had in the inspection photographs. Tall arched windows poured winter light across the ballroom. Polished oak floors reflected rows of folding chairs, and a long table near the entrance held thick auction catalogs beside glasses of sparkling water. Jasmine signed in under her own name and took a seat 3 rows from the back. No assistant, no dramatic entrance. Just a black dress, a wool coat folded over her arm, and Monica Hayes beside her with a slim leather folder. Monica leaned closer. "You know they are here." Jasmine glanced toward the front. Douglas Mercer was speaking to a broker. Caleb stood beside him, studying the bidding packet. Patricia and Lauren sat nearby, both dressed as if the auction were another social event. "I know," Jasmine said. "Do you want to leave?" "No." Monica studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Good." A few minutes later, Patricia spotted her. The surprise on her face lasted barely a second before politeness took over. She crossed the aisle with Lauren behind her. "Jasmine," Patricia said, "I did not expect to see you here." Jasmine closed the catalog resting on her lap. "Good afternoon, Patricia." Lauren looked around the room, then back at Jasmine. "Are you interested in preservation work again?" The question sounded harmless. The smile did not. "Something like that," Jasmine said. Patricia gave a small laugh. "Well, Harrington House is a serious acquisition. This is not exactly your price range." Jasmine met her eyes. "I know." Patricia seemed satisfied with the answer. She returned to her seat just as the auctioneer stepped to the podium. Caleb had watched the entire exchange. For a moment, his eyes met Jasmine's across the room. He looked confused, almost irritated by her presence, but the bidding started before he could approach her. Harrington House opened at $12 million. Within minutes, 3 bidders remained. Douglas raised his paddle at $14 million. Another bidder went to 15. Douglas countered at $15,500,000. Caleb leaned toward him and whispered something. Douglas nodded and pushed again. $17 million. Patricia sat straighter. Lauren stopped checking her phone. Jasmine did not move. At $19 million, Mercer Ridge hesitated. Douglas whispered sharply to Caleb, then raised the paddle one last time. $19,500,000. A representative across the aisle answered at $20 million. Douglas stared at the catalog, calculated for several seconds, then lowered his paddle. The property sold for $21,400,000 to an institutional buyer represented by a law firm in New York. Douglas muttered something under his breath. Caleb looked frustrated. Patricia looked offended, as if the building had personally rejected them. Then the auctioneer began the closing announcements. "Before we conclude, I would like to thank the beneficial owner for authorizing today's sale through Ellis Heritage Trust." Caleb's head lifted. Monica opened the leather folder. "Jasmine," she said quietly, "they need your signature." The room did not become silent all at once. It happened in pieces. Douglas turned first, then Patricia. Lauren stopped breathing long enough to notice it herself. Jasmine walked toward the side table where the closing attorney waited with a document. Caleb stepped into the aisle. "Jasmine." She signed the authorization and handed the pen back. The attorney checked the page. "Thank you, Ms. Ellis. As managing trustee and sole beneficial owner, your approval completes the seller's authorization." Caleb stared at her. "You own this building?" Jasmine looked at him calmly. "The trust did." Douglas was already flipping through the catalog, searching for the seller entity printed in the disclosure section. His face changed when he found it. Not because of Harrington House, because he recognized the name. Ellis Heritage Trust appeared on 2 other property records he had seen before. 2 buildings currently leased by Mercer Ridge Properties. And as Monica closed the folder, Jasmine realized the auction had revealed only the first thing the Mercers had never bothered to ask about her. Caleb caught up with Jasmine near the coat check before she could leave Harrington House. "Wait." His voice was low, but sharp enough to make her stop. Monica stayed a few steps away, giving Jasmine space without disappearing. Caleb looked different than he had 20 minutes earlier. Not angry exactly. Unsteady. "How long?" he asked. Jasmine slipped one arm into her coat. "How long what? How long have you owned all of this?" The trust has been in my family for years. Caleb stared at her. And you never told me? Jasmine looked at him for a moment. I told you my family had money. You never asked anything beyond that. That is not the same thing. No, it is not. His face tightened. We were married, Jasmine. I remember. The answer landed harder than if she had raised her voice. Caleb looked over his shoulder. Douglas was still near the front, speaking quickly into his phone, while Patricia stood beside him with the auction catalog open in her hands. Lauren had stopped pretending not to watch. My father says Ellis Heritage Trust owns 2 properties Mercer Ridge leases, Caleb said. Is that true? Yes. Since when? Before you and I met. Caleb gave a short, disbelieving laugh. You are telling me my family has been paying rent to your trust for years, and you just never mentioned it. Those leases were negotiated through outside management. I was not sitting at a desk approving your father's checks. That is not the point. Jasmine's expression changed. Then tell me what the point is. Caleb lowered his voice. The point is that I did not know who I was married to. For the first time since the auction, something inside Jasmine hardened. No, Caleb. You knew exactly who you were married to. You knew where I worked. You knew what I cared about. You knew how I lived. What you did not know was my net worth. He looked away. That difference was suddenly difficult for him to argue with. By Monday morning, the auction was no longer private industry gossip. Someone had recorded Patricia's comment about Harrington House not being in Jasmine's price range. The clip was only 12 seconds long, but the person who posted it also included a photograph of Jasmine signing the seller authorization. Within hours, people in Philadelphia real estate circles were sharing it with captions Patricia would have hated. Jasmine hated it too. She asked Monica if there was any way to get it taken down. Probably not completely, Monica said over the phone. But we can keep you from feeding it. Good. I do not want interviews. You will get requests. Decline them. That afternoon, Douglas Mercer called. Not Caleb. Douglas. I want to make one thing clear, he said after a stiff greeting. We expect the existing lease terms to be honored. Jasmine leaned back in her office chair. Of course. He paused, apparently prepared for a fight that did not arrive. There will be no changes? Not outside the contracts. No retaliation? Jasmine almost smiled. Douglas, I am not interested in running a business based on family grudges. His silence told her he had expected exactly that. When the call ended, Jasmine sat quietly for a few seconds. The strange part was that she did not feel victorious. She felt tired. The reveal had not erased 6 years. It had only forced people to look at her differently. That evening, Caleb called again. Jasmine let it ring twice before answering. His voice was quieter this time. I keep thinking about something. What? He hesitated. If I had known, I would have handled things differently. Jasmine closed her eyes. There it was. Not an apology. Not yet. Something worse, because Caleb still did not understand what he had just admitted. You want to meet? He asked. Jasmine opened her eyes. Tomorrow. 1 hour. And before she hung up, she already knew there was only one question she needed him to answer. Caleb chose a quiet coffee shop near Washington Square, the kind of place where no one from Redwood Crest was likely to recognize him. Jasmine arrived 5 minutes early, ordered tea, and took a table by the window. When Caleb walked in, he looked like he had not slept much. No suit jacket, no polished smile, just a gray sweater, tired eyes, and both hands wrapped around a paper cup he barely touched. For a while, neither of them said anything. Then Caleb exhaled. I was wrong about a lot of things. Jasmine waited. I let my family get in my head, he continued. I started caring too much about what people thought, about where I worked, who I knew, how we looked together. Jasmine looked at him evenly. You did not just care about how we looked together. You started caring whether I made you look important. Caleb flinched, but he did not argue. Maybe. Not maybe. He nodded. Fine. You are right. The words should have felt satisfying. They did not. Jasmine stirred her tea once, then stopped. Yesterday you said if you had known, you would have handled things differently. Caleb leaned back. I meant the divorce. The way my mother talked to you. The settlement. Everything. Jasmine held his gaze. So if you had known I had money, you would have treated me better? His face changed immediately. That is not what I meant. Then what did you mean? Caleb opened his mouth, closed it, then looked down at the table. I do not know. Jasmine let the silence sit between them. She had spent years filling Caleb's silences for him. Not anymore. Finally, he said, I guess I thought you needed me more than you did. Jasmine felt something click into place. And that made it easier to disrespect me? No. It made it easier to let your mother disrespect me. Caleb looked toward the window. I was trying to keep the peace. You kept peace with everyone except your wife. That one reached him. He rubbed a hand over his face. I know. Jasmine leaned back. The money is not the part you should be embarrassed about, Caleb. You should be embarrassed that you thought a woman had to be financially useful to deserve your loyalty. He stared at her. For once, there was no comeback, no careful business language, no explanation about stress or timing. Just the uncomfortable truth. I did love you, he said quietly. I know. Do you believe that? Yes. Caleb looked surprised. Jasmine continued. That is what makes this harder. You loved me, and then you started valuing other things more. He swallowed. Is there any chance we could try again? Jasmine looked at the man she had once imagined growing old with. Part of her remembered the kitchen table presentations, the road trips, the cheap pizza, the version of Caleb who did not need an audience. But memory was not the same as trust. No, she said. Caleb's shoulders dropped. Because of what I did. Because you are only starting to understand what you did. Her phone buzzed against the table. Patricia Mercer. Jasmine almost ignored it, but the message preview caught her attention. We need to discuss the leases before your people make any decisions that affect the family. Jasmine read it twice. Caleb noticed her expression. What is it? She turned the phone face down. Your mother still thinks this is about leverage. Caleb sighed. She is panicking. Why? He hesitated. My father found out one of the Mercer Ridge leases comes up for renewal this summer. Jasmine said nothing. Caleb leaned forward. Jasmine, whatever happens between us, please do not punish my family through the business. She looked at him, almost disappointed. You still think that is what I am going to do? Caleb had no answer. Jasmine stood, pulled on her coat, and picked up her bag. Tell your father to read his contract. I will honor every word of it. And after that? Caleb asked. Jasmine paused. After that, he will deal with the company managing the trust. Not with me. Caleb watched her leave, not yet understanding that the decision Jasmine had already made would take away the one thing his family expected to use against her: personal access. By the next morning, Ellis Heritage Trust was preparing to move every Mercer Ridge property under independent management, and Patricia was about to discover that Jasmine did not need revenge to make their old power disappear. The notice reached Mercer Ridge Properties at 9:15 the next morning. It was not dramatic. No threatening language. No oversized legal packet. Just a formal letter stating that all Ellis Heritage Trust properties would now be handled by Northgate Asset Management, an independent commercial management firm, effective immediately. Douglas read it twice before calling Caleb. She is cutting us off, he said. Caleb was standing near the windows of his office at Redwood Crest Capital. No, she is removing herself from the relationship. That is the same thing. It really is not. Douglas lowered his voice. One of our leases expires in July. If Northgate decides not to renew, relocating that division will cost us a fortune. Caleb looked at the city below him and thought about Jasmine's last words at the coffee shop. Tell your father to read his contract. She had not threatened them. That was the part his family still could not understand. They had spent years assuming that if Jasmine ever gained leverage, she would use it the way they would have. That afternoon, Patricia went around everyone and called Jasmine directly. I think this has gone far enough, she said without bothering with small talk. Jasmine was at her office reviewing plans for a neighborhood restoration project. What exactly has gone far enough? This business with the leases. The leases have not changed. You handed them to some outside firm, a professional management company. Patricia paused. Douglas believes this is personal. Jasmine set down her pen. Douglas believes everything is personal when he is no longer controlling it. Patricia's voice cooled. We welcomed you into this family. Jasmine almost laughed, but there was nothing funny about the sentence. Patricia, you celebrated when I left it. Silence. Then Patricia said, you could make this difficult for us. I could. Jasmine let that sit for a second. I am choosing not to. The call ended soon after. 2 weeks passed. Northgate completed its review of the Mercer leases and sent Douglas a standard renewal proposal for the property expiring in July. Market rate. Ordinary terms. No penalty. No special treatment. No revenge. Douglas stared at the numbers and realized Jasmine had given him exactly what he claimed to want. Business without emotion. Somehow, that unsettled him more than retaliation would have. But the bigger consequence was unfolding somewhere else. At Redwood Crest, Caleb had started losing focus. Not because Jasmine had contacted his employer. She had not. Not because the auction damaged his job. It had not. The problem was quieter. He could no longer sit through meetings where men talked about people as assets without hearing himself in the language. During one Monday strategy session, a senior partner dismissed a long-time building manager as replaceable overhead. Caleb surprised everyone by saying, "He has been there 18 years. Maybe we should talk to him before deciding what his value is." The room went still. 3 months earlier, Caleb would have stayed silent. That night, he opened the old drawer in his apartment where he had kept documents from the marriage. At the bottom was a folded note Jasmine had written years ago before one of his biggest interviews. "You do not have to become somebody else to belong in the room." He sat there for a long time. By spring, Caleb resigned from Redwood Crest. His father called it an emotional mistake. Patricia blamed the divorce. Lauren told friends he was having a crisis. Caleb did not correct any of them. For once, he was tired of performing certainty. Across town, Jasmine met with Monica to review the final distribution from the Harrington house sale. Monica slid a proposal across the table. "There is something I think your mother would have liked." Jasmine opened it. The trust had been offered an old public library building in West Philadelphia, closed for years and headed toward private redevelopment. The city was looking for a buyer willing to preserve it. Jasmine ran her fingers over the photograph. "What would it become?" Monica smiled. "That part would be up to you." Jasmine looked at the boarded windows, the worn stone steps, the faded lettering above the entrance. For the first time since the divorce, the money in front of her did not feel connected to Caleb or the Mercers at all. It felt like possibility. And what Jasmine chose to build there would finally reveal what ownership had always meant to her. By early fall, the old library had light in its windows again. The stone facade had been cleaned without erasing its age. The original lettering above the entrance had been restored, and the boarded front doors had been replaced with glass that opened onto a bright public lobby. Jasmine stood near the back of the room during the opening reception, watching neighborhood families walk through a building that had been empty for years. The first floor held classrooms and shared workspaces. Upstairs, there were small offices for local nonprofits and new business owners who could not afford downtown rent. A reading room occupied the corner facing the park. Jasmine had insisted on keeping that. Monica found her beside a wall displaying photographs from the restoration. "You did good," she said. Jasmine smiled. "We did useful." Monica laughed. "That sounds like your mother." It was supposed to. Later, after most of the guests had left, Jasmine walked into the reading room alone. On one shelf sat a framed photograph of Denise Ellis. Younger than Jasmine remembered her, standing outside another building the family trust had preserved decades earlier. Beneath it was a small plaque with one sentence Denise used to repeat whenever money came up. "Ownership means responsibility before it means privilege." Jasmine ran her thumb across the edge of the frame. For years, she had thought hiding the scale of the trust protected something pure in her life. Maybe part of it had. Maybe part of it had also kept her from having conversations she should have had sooner. She could admit that now without turning the entire marriage into her fault. Growing wiser did not require rewriting what happened. Her phone buzzed in her purse. A message from Caleb. "Congratulations on the library. I saw the article. Your mother would be proud." Jasmine read it once. There was no request to meet. No attempt to reopen the past. She typed, "Thank you, Caleb," and put the phone away. That was all. Across the city, Caleb passed Harrington House on foot one evening after meeting an old colleague. Construction crews had begun converting it for the new owners. The auction sign was gone. Fresh permits covered one window. He stopped for a moment where months earlier his father had expected to buy the property, and his family had expected Jasmine to be embarrassed simply for standing in the room. He understood now that the building had never been the real loss. Neither was the trust. Neither was the money. He had spent years becoming the kind of man who could recognize value on a spreadsheet while missing it across his own dinner table. There was no dramatic punishment for that. Life rarely worked that way. His punishment was knowing exactly when he had been given something good and exactly how casually he had helped destroy it. Back at the library, Monica brought Jasmine one final envelope. "Your closing file," she said. "Everything connected to the divorce is officially archived." Jasmine held it for a moment, then placed it inside a desk drawer. She did not tear it up. She did not need to. Paper only had the power people continued giving it. Monica leaned against the doorway. Do you ever wish they had known from the beginning? Jasmine thought about Patricia's comments, Douglas's assumptions, Lauren's laughter, and Caleb asking whether things could have been different. Then she looked through the glass wall at a teenage girl doing homework at one of the new tables while her mother worked nearby. For a long time, I thought what they did not know was the important part, Jasmine said. It was not. Monica waited. Jasmine continued. The important part was that they thought they needed a reason to respect me. Outside, the streetlights came on one by one. Jasmine picked up her coat and turned off the reading room lamp. She had once believed winning meant watching the Mercers finally understand what they had underestimated. In the end, their understanding mattered far less than she expected. Money had given her choices. The trust had given her leverage. But neither one had given her worth. That had been there before the marriage, during the humiliation, after the divorce, and even on the days when she forgot it herself. Some people only recognize value after a number appears beside it. The hardest lesson Jasmine learned was not how to prove them wrong. It was how to stop needing them to.